Okay, hope everybody recovered from the fast yesterday. And let's hope that these coming 3 weeks will bring not only refuah shlema to those who need it, but bring some geula for all of us as well. Okay. We stopped on the top of 126a yesterday, okay, where we said that question of whether the item that we were talking about, namely the stopper for the, let's call it the window shutter or the skylight, okay? At the bottom of 125b, that was the new Mishnah, okay? That what is the difference between this and this? That the rabbi said, regardless this or this, one could still use it to close it up. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Kahana, he said, Bein kashur, bein she'eno kashur. What the rabbis were saying was whether it was fastened to the window or fastened to the shutter or not fastened, okay? Vehu shemitukan, so long as it's prepared. In other words, it's been designated as something available for Shabbat, okay? Now, remember we did see that there was an issue that the Gemara presented to us previously as to whether that preparation for Shabbat had to be done by a physical act or was it sufficient to mentally focus and say that was the case, okay? So we're going to have to see if the Gemara comes back to that issue, okay? But right now, as we pick up on 126a, second line, Amarle Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah responded, okay, V'leim amar, but let the master say, Bein talui, bein she'eno talui, v'hu shekashur. Instead of saying that it has to be prepared, say whether it's hanging, okay? In other words, whether it's suspended from the item or not, but so long as it is fastened. The Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, as said by Rabbi Bar Bar Chana in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kimachloket Kan, just as there is an argument here. Kach machloket benegar hanigrar. So likewise is the machloket in terms of dragging the bolt. In other words, dragging the door bolt. Okay, we saw that was the case. Ditznan, as it was taught there. Okay, namely nagar hanigrar, a door bolt that has to be dragged over and then put onto the door. No'alin bo b'mikdash, aber lo b'medina. Okay, citing a Braita that they can lock the doors in the Beis Hamikdash, but not outside of the Beit Hamikdash. Remember that Shvut, okay, which is the rabbinical prohibition of any kind of work on Shabbat, does not apply in the Beit HaMikdash, but does apply outside. V'hamunach kan v'kan asur, says. And therefore we learn, though, that if one simply lays it on the ground, it's forbidden in both places, both in the Mikdash and in the Medina and in the countryside. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he disagrees. Omer hamunach b'mikdash. If it's simply resting there, lying within the Beis HaMikdash precinct, v'hanigrar b'medina, and one who drags it, okay, brings it over, and then to be able to stick it onto the door in the countryside, okay, Vitanya, and it's taught there, okay. So in other words, Rabbi Yehuda disagreed with that Braita. So now the Gemara is going to bring another braita to try to clarify, right? V'tanya, ezahu nagar hanigrar, shenoalin bo b'mikdash. What do we mean when we say dragging the door bolt by which they can lock or close a door in the Beis HaMikdash area, precinct of Aloba Medina, okay, but not in the countryside? Kol shekashur v'talui v'rosho magia la'aretz. It's such a door bolt that it is tied to the door, it's hanging, and the head of it, okay, when it let's say removed from its place, it hangs down to the point that it's touching the ground. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, Zeh af b'medina mutar, that in that case, he claims that such a door bolt in the countryside is permitted. Ela ezahu sheb'medinat asur. But then what kind of door bolt in the countryside would be prohibited? Kol she'eno lo kashur v'lo talui. It's one that is not fastened or tied, and one that is not hanging, suspended. V'shamto, and they must remove it. Umanicho b'keren zavit. And then they take that large bolt and they put it, stand it up, let's say, in the corner of the house. V'amar Rabbi Yoshua bar Mishmei Ula, and he says in the name of Ula, Man Tana Nagar Hanigrar. Okay, he asks the question then, okay, who is the Tana that teaches this issue about the dragging the bolt, and implies that it's somebody who's saying that it has to be fastened and suspended? Rabbi Elazar, it's Rabbi Elazar. Okay. Amarle, and he said to him, Ana the Amre ki hai Tana. He's basically saying, I hold with the following Tana, namely the Tanya who teaches this braita. Kana shehitkinu be'erev bal habayit liot potech v'no elbo, that if a householder had prepared a kind of reed, okay, this is really more in terms of the fact that it almost was used, some want to say like a key to open or close a lock in the door, okay, right? Others want to say, no, it's actually something that you have tied to the door and you stick it in to lock the door. So, kana shehitkinu ba'al habayit liot potech v'no elbo, bizman shekashur v'talui b'petach, at the time that it is fastened or tied and suspended from the doorway, potech v'no elbo, one can open and close and lock with it. Ein kashur v'talui, if it's not tied or right or fastened and suspended from it, ein potech v'no elbo, one cannot open and close with it. Okay? Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer mitukan afal pi she'eno kashur. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds that if it's considered prepared, in other words, that it's been designated for that purpose in advance before Shabbat, okay, it's fine, it's usable, okay, even though it is not fastened. Now, Amar Rav Yehuda bar Shilat. So Rav Yehuda bar Shilat is going to attempt to give another statement. Amar Rav Asi, in the name of Rav Asi. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Halacha Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. The law is according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The Gemara asks, Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi? Did Rabbi Yochanan really say that? V'hatanan. But aren't we taught elsewhere? Okay, in another text, Kol Kisuye Hakelim, all lids of vessels, Sheyesh Lehem Beit Achuzah, that they have a handle, Nitlein b'Shabbat, are able to be handled on Shabbat. V'amar Rav Yehuda bar Shila, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. And then we also see that Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila, in the name of Rav Asi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, says, V'hu sheyesh Torat Kli Aleihen. But that's so long as those lids have an identification as a utensil. Okay? V'chi tema hachanami. And if you're going to say that here too, okay, de'ika Torat Kli Alav, that in our case of the door bolt, or even in our case of the pakak there, the shutter closer, right? Umi bai Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Torat Kli Alav. Does Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel require that these items also be considered utensils? V'hatanya. But isn't it taught elsewhere in another Braita? Charayot shel dekel. If you have the hard branches of a palm tree, shegadram l'shem eitzim, and they were basically cut down to be used for firewood. V'nimlach aleihen liyeshiva, and afterwards he changed his mind and decided to use them for sitting purposes. Tzarich lekasher, one needs to bind them together. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, ein tzarich lekasher. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, one does not have to bind them together. Okay? And by saying that, it means they can be handled without tying. And if that's the case, they're not utensils. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan, svirale kivate bechada, aligale bechada. It must imply that Rabbi Yochanan agrees with him in one case and disagrees with him in another case. Okay? So that is the situation, in essence, that he agrees with him that it doesn't have to be tied, but he disagrees with him in terms of the fact that they have to have the assumption that they're considered a utensil. Okay? All right, let's go on. The Rash Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak now, Nafcha, who was a smithy, okay, gave the following drasha.
Rabbi Green?
Yes.
Just on what we're just going through now, it talks about being designated for the purpose.
Right.
So
Okay.
Does he have to do that each week or just once?
It would seem to be the designated for that particular Shabbat, right? Okay, because if you have something that you set aside, okay, remember we saw there were different reasons to set something aside, like a financial concern for the safety, for maintaining the quality of the item. Okay, so once it's, so to speak, muktzah, set aside, it can't be used. Therefore, you have to at least mentally, as we've seen, designate it as viable, usable for Shabbat. If not, for that Shabbat, or if not, otherwise, at least you need to do some sort of act to physically designated as ready for Shabbat.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we finish up on this section, this parak. The Rash Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Pitcha Deresh Galuta. That Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, the smithy, gave a explanation at the opening, the entranceway to the Reish Galuta's house or whatever. Halakha Rabbi Eliezer, that the law is like Rabbi Eliezer, okay, in this case. All right? Now, okay, what happens? Meitiv Rav Amram. Okay, Rav Amram challenges this, and he raises the point from a Braita. Okay, Umedivrehem lamanu shapokakin umodadin v'koshrin b'Shabbat. Okay, but if that's, he said, his objection is, from these words we could learn that you can close, in other words, lock or seal a window or close the shutter. And not only that, but you can measure, modadin, and here the reference is to measure in a mikvah, v'koshrin, and even it would seem to imply tie a temporary knot on Shabbat, okay? Because in that particular case, okay, if it doesn't have to be fastened and suspended, okay, it means that there doesn't need to be a physical act in advance. Okay? Amar le Abaye, so Abaye responds, Mai datech mishum de katani stama, is that reason that you're saying that is because this a Mishnah or Braita was taught anonymously? Nagar hanigrar nami stamahi. The Braita, Mishnah, regarding dragging the bolt, okay, and using that also was taught anonymously, okay? But in that particular case, okay, that was really the view of only Rabbi Eliezer, okay? Ba'afilu hachi ma'aser rav, okay, says the Gemara. And even in that case, okay, when you have a real incident, a real story, that adds an explanation to and focus to determining the halakha. Okay? So in that particular case, it's not just a theory, but it's based on actual practice. Okay? All right, new Mishnah. And with this, we're going to be finishing the parak, matnitin. Kol kisuye hakelim sheyesh lehem beit achiza. We see this was referred to earlier. Any kind of utensil that has a lid, and the lid has some sort of a handle, right? Nitlin b'Shabbat, may be handled on Shabbat. Amar Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, b'med varim amurim. What are we talking about here? I said, Bekisui karkaot. We're talking about a covering for something on the ground. Okay? What came to my mind was a manhole cover. Okay? You don't usually, okay, all right? Or, okay, usually there's no handle on it. Or think of another example would be in the back of our apartments on the ground floor, you have the, let's call it the little, sometimes they're green, they're painted green. The water faucet holders, where there is no handle on them, but there is a hole in them in which you can somehow lift it up in order to reach down, in order to turn your water on and off in your apartment. Okay? Aval b'kisui hakelim. Okay? But with regards to lids, okay, on utensils, ben kach uben kach nitlin b'Shabbat. In any case, they may be handled on Shabbat. Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, this is Rav Yehuda bar Shila, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. V'hu sheyesh Torat kli aleihen. But this implies, he says, that they have the identification, the character of a utensil. The Chuli Alma, Kisui Karkaot, that everybody says in regards to coverings, okay, over land, Im yesh lahen beit achiza en ilolo. Everybody says if it has a handle on it, yes. If it doesn't have a handle on it, no. Kisui hakeli. But when we talk about lids for utensils, afal gav de'ein lahem beit achiza, even though they don't have some sort of handle on it, ki plige, when do they argue? The kelim, the chavrinhu ba'ara, they're talking about those utensils that are actually attached to the ground, okay? Where for them, they were actually talking about like an oven cover, okay? Because maybe they had dug the oven, put it into a pit, okay? And then they would cover it over. Mar svar gazrinen, mar svar lo gazrinen, okay? Right, that one of them holds that we forbid it in advance, that we make it right, while the other holds that we don't forbid it in advance. Lishna achrina, or we might say other language, okay, ki plige b'kisui tanur, that they're arguing in terms of the cover for a oven. Okay, in this case, Mard Madame Le Kisui Karka. One master compares it to a lid, a cover on the ground. Umar Madame Le Kisui Kalim. And the other master compares it to the cover of a utensil. Adranalach Kol HaKalim. And that's how we finish that particular parak. Okay. We're now going to start a new parak, okay? And what we're going to see here, okay, is this parak sort of combines a number of different topics. It picks up where we left off initially on some discussion of muktzah. It's then going to deal with animal care on Shabbat. And then from there, it's going to deal also with care of a woman giving birth as well on Shabbat. And as I referred to a little bit earlier, part of the issue here is going to be that of the topic of Shvut, which is the rabbinic prohibition, okay, on certain kinds of work on Shabbat. And because it's the Rabbanan and not the Oraita, there are times where the rabbis can determine leniency, okay, in this topic, okay? So let's pick up now, and we'll go through as much as we can, all right, till our time is reached. Okay? So we start off with a Mishnah that says the following. Okay, Mefanin afilu arba v'chamesh kupot shel teven v'shel tvua mepnei ha'orchim. Okay, question was, you have a storehouse, and in your storehouse you have baskets of either grain or goods or things like that. Okay, are you permitted to go into the storehouse and clear and move those baskets around? Okay. One question would be, Is this an issue of exertion? Another question would be, okay, if it's simply a question of shvut, a rabbinic prohibition, do we say that the arrival of guests and their needing that space allows you to move these things around? Or might you say that it's not the case? So our Mishnah said that it is permitted, okay, to move, remove, even to take out of the storehouse 4 or 5 baskets of straw, okay, or produce, okay, in this case, could be grain, all right, to make room for guests. Umipnei bitul beit hamidrash, or also if you need that space for Talmud Torah, for learning, okay, aval lo et ha'otzar, okay, but you cannot move it, okay, simply to store them in another place. Mifanim truma tahora, says the Mishnah. One also can remove a truma that is tahor, even though if you're an Israelite, you don't get the benefit from that truma. That's only edible for the Kohen, who demai, and you're able to remove demai. But again, if you're a wealthy person, you don't get any benefit from the demai, okay? But you're still permitted, according to the Mishnah, to remove it. Uma'aser rishon shenit la trumato. And ma'aser rishon, first tithe, once it has truma taken, but it hasn't been given to the Levi yet, and it's due to the Levi. So even if you're not a Levi, you can move it. Uma'aser sheni, and also ma'aser sheni. Vehekdesh sheniftu, and any other kind of produce that had been designated sanctified once it even has been redeemed. Okay? The Gemara then continues. The Mishnah, I'm sorry. Vahaturmus hayavesh, and one can remove dry legumes, dry lupine. Okay? We'll see the Gemara is going to ask the question why, specifically dry lupines. Okay? The Mishnah says, because this is a common food for goats, right? Aval lo et hatevel, but one is not permitted to remove tevel, which is any totally untithed produce. V'lo et ma'aser rishon shelo nat la trumato, and not first ma'aser, okay, first tithing, in which there has been no truma taken from it. V'lo et ma'aser hasheni, and not second ma'aser, okay, v'hekdesh shelo nifdu, and not consecrated produce, excuse me, that has not been redeemed. V'lo et haluf, and not another kind of plant, which some could call an arum, others call an onion. V'lo et hachardel, and not the mustard seed. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel matir beluf. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, however, permits the removal of this arum or onion plant, mipnei shehu ma'achal orvin, because it is normally food for ravens. Chavilei kash, v'chavilei etzim, v'chavilei zradim, bundles of straw, and bundles of wood, and bundles of twigs. Im hitkinan lema'achal behema, if one had in advance prepared them as food for animals, metaltalinotan, we're permitted to handle them. Ve'im lav, and if not, ein metaltalin otam. Then we're not permitted to handle them. Okay, now says the Gemara, Hashta, here now, okay, that chamesh mefanim, that we say that there are 5 items that can be cleared away. Arba mabaye, do we need to say that there are 4 that are questionable? Amar Rav Chisda, Arba mechimesh. Says Rav Chisda, it means 4 out of the 5. Okay? In other words, when it said 4 or 5 at the beginning of a Mishnah, did it mean 4? Did it mean 5? Okay? In other words, one could move the majority of them, but not all of them, says Rav Chisda. Okay? So the Gemara continues, Ika da Amre, Arba me Otsar Katan. And there are those who say what they're referring to is only 4 from a small storehouse. V'chamesh me Otsar Gadol. And 5 from a larger storehouse. So Gemara asks, Umai aval lo et ha'otzar shelo yatchil ba'otzar tchila. So what does it mean when it says, sorry, that it says that it can't be done for the storehouse for the very first time? Okay. Umani, according to whom is that? Okay. Who rules that way? When we said if it hadn't been started, if the storehouse hadn't been started being used as a storehouse, whether for food for himself or for animals before Shabbat, it's not therefore considered prepared, and therefore it can't, stuff in it can't be moved. Okay. Who is it? Rabbi. It's Rabbi. He says, that's the case. Rabbeinu, Hananel, I'm sorry, Rabbi Yehuda he. It's Rabbi Yehuda. De'it le muksa, because he holds with the principle of muksa. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, just as something, Arba v'chamesh k'da amre, when it says 4 or 5, right? When it's talking about k'da amre inshe, it's more like the way people normally speaking. V'ibaye afilu tuva nami mefani, and if he needs more, he could clear away more. So it's just, if you will, stylistic. Umai aval lo et ha'otzar. So when then does our Mishnah mean when it says, but not the storehouse? Shelo yigmor kulo, that he shouldn't finish removing all of it. Dilma ate la'ashvuye gumot. Why? Because then our concern might be that he will come and if there are holes in the floor, he will come to level the floor as well. Aval et chuli matchil. Okay, but one can begin nevertheless. Okay, in other words, one can still, okay, do the removal. Umani, according to whom is that? Rabbi Shimon he. That's according to Rabbi Shimon, Dalit le muktzah, who does not hold by the prohibition of muktzah. Okay, going on. Tana Rabbanan, a new Braita. Ein matchilin ba'otzar tchila. This is the Braita. We should not begin or start with a storehouse for the first time. In other words, if it hasn't been used before, like we're saying, all right? Aval osebo shvil kadei sheyikanes v'yetzei. But he may, however, in this case, make some sort of a pathway for him to get in and out. So the Gemara asks, Osebo Shvil, say he makes a pathway, Baha'amart ein matchilin. But here you just said that he shouldn't begin. In other words, if it's not been used, he can't use it. Hachi kamar. This is what he means to say. Sorry. Osebo shvil beraglav, beknisato ubiyetziato. That he makes a path with his feet as he enters and goes out. And this is different from actually handling the baskets. Okay, a new braita. Tanu Rabbanan. Okay. Tvua, tzvura bizman shehitchil ba me'erev Shabbat. If he has produce that is piled up, okay, from the time for storage, of course, and began using, therefore, the storehouse and the produce on the eve of Shabbos, mutar lehistapek mimena b'Shabbat. He's permitted to take supplies from it on Shabbat. Ve'im lav, and if not, asur lehistapek mimena b'Shabbat. Then he's forbidden to take supplies from it on Shabbat. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. This is the view of Rabbi Shimon. Reb Acha matir, but Reb Acha disagrees and he permits it. So the Gemara asks, Klape Laya, in what direction do we go here, so to speak? Ela Ema, rather I would say, Divrei Rabbi Acha. This is the view of Rabbi Acha, the Rabbi Shimon matir. And it's Rabbi Shimon who permits it. Because remember, we said it's Rabbi Shimon who doesn't hold by muktzah. Okay, let's go on. Tana Kama, says a Tana. Kama shi'or tvua tzvura. How much produce, right, has to be stored there, okay, to be heaped together, right? Letech. A letech, which is half a core, okay, basically 15 seah, but it doesn't mean that it's the whole storehouse. Bai mine Rabbi Nechumi bar Zechariah me Abai. Shi'ur tvua tzvura b'kama. So he asks, again, what is the standard, what's the measurement for produce to heap together? Okay. Amarle, he said to him, Hare Amru, Shi'ur tvura tzvura, letech. Here they've already said that the amount is clearly, that's heaped together, is this letech, half a core. Ibayalahu. So now they ask the general question of the rabbis. Hani arba v'chamesh kupot dekamar. These 4 or 5 basketfuls of produce, sorry, that we're talking about. Ba'arba v'chamesh kupot ein tfei lo. If we're talking 4 or 5, that can be removed, but more not. Is that the question? Alma, therefore, le'me'ute behilucha adif. This would seem to imply that it comes to limit the amount of going back and forth. In other words, the person's walking. Okay? Odilma lema'ute masuye adif. Or are we perhaps saying that this comes to limit the burden that the person has to carry? Okay? So in other words, coming back to our question of, is this an issue of exertion? Tashma, says the new Braita. The Tani Chada Mefanim Afilu Arba V'Chamesh Kupot. Okay, Shel Kadei Shemen. This Braita teaches, okay, that according to one Braita, one can remove even 4 or 5 baskets of jugs of oil, v'shel kadei yayin, and of jugs of wine, v'tanya idach, and we have another braita that teaches be'eser u'b'chamesh esrei, with 10 or 15. Okay, right? And then, mai lav baha kamiflagei, don't these two braitas seem to disagree? What are they disagreeing about? Who said the braitas? Demar savar me'ute bahilucha adif, that one master must hold to limit the amount of walking is preferred. Umar savar me'ute b'masui adif, and the other master must hold that limiting the amount of the burden is to be preferred. Lo, no, says the Gemara. The kuli alma ma'ute behilucha adif. Everybody is in agreement to limit the amount of walking. Umisvarat be'eser u'bechamesh esrei akupot kai. And can you really think that if you're talking about 10 or 15 baskets of, let's say, the wine or the oil, that's what it's referring to? Okay? Akadin kai, says the Gemara. They're talking about the jugs, is what it's dealing with. Velo kasha. And there is no problem here. Ha, the mishtakale chad chad bakupa. In one case, he removes them one at a time in a basket. Vaha, the mishtakale tray tray. In another way, the other one says he's removing 2 jugs at a time in a basket. Vaha, the mishtakale tzlata tzlata. And here, maybe he's removing it 3 of them, 3 jugs in a basket. Ubedekure the harpanaya. Okay, and here in this case, okay, what he's saying is that they're small jugs, the jugs like that come from the location of harpanaya, which, they are actually wrapped in like a reed basket. Okay? New piece from our Mishnah. Ibailahu. So they ask as follows. Hani arba v'chamesh ka'amar. Again, these 4 or 5 that we talked about, right? Afagav de'itle orchin tuva. What about if he has more guests? Okay. O dilma hakol lefi ha'orchin. Or perhaps we say it's based on the number of guests. Ve'im tirtzeh lomar, and if you want to say hakol lefi ha'orchin, that it depends on the number of guests. Chad gavra mefane lekulhu. Do we say that one person removes all these baskets, okay, for all of them? Or dilma gavra gavra mefane lenafshe? Or do we say that each person sort of removes for himself? Tashma. Listen to the following braita. Okay. The Amar Rabba Amar Rabbi Chia. It says Rabba in the name of Rabbi Chia. Rebbe, okay, I'm sorry, Rabbi Chia. Pam echat halach Rebbe lemakom acher. One time Rebbe went to a certain place. Right? V'ra'a makom dachuk l'talmidim. And he saw that the location was too cramped for all the students. V'yatza l'sadeh, u'matzah sadeh mleya omarim. And he went out to the field next to the storehouse, I guess, and he saw that the field was full of omarim, right? It was full of sheaves of grain. Ve'amar, and he basically cleared the field of the sheaves. And Rebbe kol hasadeh kula, and he cleared all of the field of sheaves of grain. So again, trying to see that this would be the imply one person does it for all the guests, or all the others. Shma mina hakol lefi ha'orchin. From this we would learn that everything is based on the number of people, the number of guests. Okay? Right, that would seem to be the case. V'Rav Yosef, Amar. So Rav Yosef says, Amar Rabbi Hoshea, in the name of Rabbi Hoshea. Pam echad halach Rabbi Chia lemakom acher. One time Rabbi Chia went to another place. V'ra'a makom dachuk l'talmidim. And he saw it was too cramped for all the students. V'yatza l'sadeh, u'matzah sadeh mleya omerim. And he saw a field, and the field was full of sheaves of grain. V'emer, and he cleared it. Rabbi Chia kol hasadeh kula, all of the field. Shma mina hakol afi ha'orchi. This also seems to tell us in this story that it's based on the number of guests, right? So the Gemara then, however, tells us, Va'adayin tabayilach chad gavra mefane lekula. This still comes to ask the question, does one person clear it for all of them? Or dilma kol gavra v'gavra mefane lenavshe? Or does each person clear for himself? Okay, Tashma, says the Gemara, Ve'imer Rebbe. It said Rebbe cleared, Utla ta'amech. And according to that line of reasoning, Rebbe b'denafshe imer, you're going to say Rebbe himself is going to do the clearing of the sheaves? Elet siva va'amer. Rather, he commanded others, and they cleared. Ulam kol chad v'chad mefane lenafshe. And therefore we determine that each one clears for himself. Okay? We have a couple more minutes, I think. I'll just go a little bit further. Mafane ha'orchim v'chui.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Last week, or the start of this week, I don't know how to say it, but we were seeing somebody watching their house burn down.
Yeah.
And they couldn't move anything around, couldn't save anything.
Right. Well, that was a situation where that one person, remember, you're talking about when the Gentile soldiers came? Is that the story? Or just in general?
In general.
In other words, he can't tell people, he can't tell them, save my stuff. All right? But he could say to them, whoever saves items won't lose out.
Okay.
All right? It's like when you have, I got a shaila from somebody in the email about the Gemara, and they said, does that mean you can never use a Shabbos goy? So my response to them was, you can't tell the Gentile, put on the light.
Right.
Okay? But you might be able to say to the Gentile, you know, it's awfully dark in my apartment, and I'm not going to be able to find anything. And hopefully he gets the message. Okay?
But here it's presumably a Jewish guest in the house, and they're carrying stuff around.
Right. So this is why the question here is that our Mishnah already said that in regards to this issue of Shvut, which is a rabbinical prohibition, there are some leniencies. One of those leniencies we said would be for guests. Another leniency would be allowing space for others to come and join in learning. Okay? So if that's the case, okay, so that's a leniency because it's only a d'Rabbanan that you're prohibited and not a d'Oraita. That's what the Gemara is trying to get at. Okay, good question, Ted.
Rabbi?
Right? Yes.
Rabbi, wasn't also the threat or the possibility that someone may come out to put out the fire, if you didn't allow them to remove some of their important belongings, they may put it out.
That was the concern, right? That they would go even beyond what was permitted.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Here, there's no concern moving the bundles for sitting down. There'll be no concern of a panic.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just pick up just a little bit further because we're going to get here into a little bit of a Gadita. shouldn't be too difficult, right? Mepnei ha'orchim v'kuli, because of guests. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Gedolah hachnasat orchim kahashkamat beit hamidrash. Okay, welcoming guests is as great a mitzvah as coming early to Beis Midrash. The Katani, why? It's taught Mepnei ha'orchin and Mepnei bitul beit hamidrash. That was our Mishnah. Rav Dimi min nahar da'ah, Amar, he says, Rav Dimi. Yoter mi hashkamat beit hamidrash. It's even more worthy than coming early to shul. The Katani Mepnei ha'orchin v'hadar u'mepnei bitul beit hamidrash. Because it teaches for the guests first and afterwards, secondarily, for Beis HaMidrash. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, says Rav, Gedolah hachnasat orchim mehakbalat pnei shchina. Okay, that he says a drasha, greater is welcoming guests than welcoming the Shechina. Dichtiv, why? Because it says, Vayomer Hashem, imna matzati chen be'inecha, al na ta'avor v'gomer. When Hashem spoke to Abraham, Amar Rabbi Elazar, ba ra'oei shalo k'midat HaKadosh Baruch Hu midat basar v'dam, that the aspect of Hashem, the character of Hashem, is not like that of humans. Midat basar v'dam, ein katan yechol lomar legadol hamtein ad she'avo etzlacha. That a secondary, a lower class, a lesser important person can't tell to somebody more important, wait till I'm able to come to you. V'ilu b'kadosh baruch hu dichtib, but with regards to Hashem, it's written, Vayomer, he said, Hashem, imna matzati v'gomer, if I can find the time to come to you. In other words, Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, that Abraham dealt with his guests first before dealing with Hashem. That's the implication of the drasha. Okay, and then we go on. Shishad Varim Adam Ochel Piroteim Ba'olam Hazeh V'Hakarin Kayemet Lo La'olam Haba. Okay, we're all familiar with this, I think, right? 6 things one gets fruits in this world and the benefit extra in the next world. Ve'eluhein, and they are Achnasat Orchim, welcoming guests, Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, Ve'iyun Tfilah, investigation of prayer, V'Hashkamat Beit HaMidrash, early arrival Beis HaMidrash, V'Hamigadel Banav L'Talmud Torah, and one raises their children, sons in particular, for Torah study, V'Hadan Et Chaveiro L'Kaf Zechut, and one who judges his neighbor meritoriously. Eini, is that the case? V'ha'anan tanan, but aren't we also taught in another braita? Elu dvarim she'adam oseh otam va'ochel perotein ba'olam hazeh. Okay, v'hakeren kayemet lo la'olam haba. These are the things that one does and eats the benefits in this world and the extra in the world to come. Ve'elu hein, and these are kibud av ve'em, honoring parents, gemilut chasadim, acts of kindness, va'ava'at shalom ben adam l'chaveiro, bringing peace between one person and another, for Talmud Torah keneged kulam, and Talmud Torah is parallel to all of them. Okay, and okay, so the others, then the Gemara is just going to go on. Hani ain, these yes, midei achrin and lo, these others no. Okay, and then it's just going to finish up. Hani nami, here to b'gemilit chasadim shaychei. These others are part of acts of kindness. Lishna achrina, hani bahani shaychei. These and these are included. And we're going to stop right there and wish everybody a good Shabbos. Most of the rest of this page is Agadita. Shouldn't be too, I think, difficult. And wish, as I said, everybody a good Shabbos.
Thank you. You too. Good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good luck.
Good Shabbos to all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. Now.
Okay. Uh, Let's go home. Shows. Wow.
She's my pet. She's my baby. I'm gonna feed her healthy food just like I feed myself healthy human foods. A lot of